السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I was just waiting for this thing to be starting the broadcast since it's going through the YouTube channel of the IAR. Jazakumullah khair for your patience. Inshallah, this will be our last class before Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring Ramadan with ease on our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine, and around the world. Allahumma ameen. So we'll try to shed some light, inshallah, on the latest developments and to try to understand what is happening. Needless to say, in the last 4 days, there were so many events that took place or are taking place in Gaza, within the rest of Palestine, and also among the Zionists in Palestine and the Zionists in the US and Europe. We have seen things that we did not see before. And some of them may have been before, but not at this level. For example, we know that the war cabinet that the Zionists have composed of 3 people: Netanyahu, Gallant, who is the defense minister, and Gantz, who is a major figure in the opposition, who have joined the war cabinet. For the first time, we see that the US invites Gantz, who is an opponent of Netanyahu, and he have clearly at more than one stop opposed him and stand in his way, being invited to the US and coming here, just informing Netanyahu, I am going to the US and I will meet with such and such, and Netanyahu will tell him there's only one prime minister, meaning I do not approve of you going. You cannot just go, there's only one leader. He said, I am going anyway. And the US have invited him and scheduled meetings with officials from the vice president to national security advisor and others. Now, why do I start with this? Because this is one of the signs that the contradictions are growing within the society there. That was the first blow to Netanyahu and his authority. The second one came when Gallant is the defense minister, and Gallant is a member of the Likud. Remember, Gallant, as the defense minister, he was fired about a year ago by Netanyahu when he objected to the changes in the laws that will limit the power of the Supreme Court. When Gallant was in a position to say, slow down, you are creating a big issue domestically, we are creating a big problem, Netanyahu fired him. The whole country, as a result, came to a standstill. The airport shut down, the health system shut down, transportation shut down, and Netanyahu had to reverse himself and bring Gallant back to the cabinet as defense minister. Now, this same Gallant, with Gantz and Netanyahu, are the 3 war cabinet members. Any decision need to be given or taken by consensus by those 3. So Gallant came on Wednesday and said, we need to start discussing changing the laws and bringing the religious Jews into the service. For those who do not know, within the Jewish faith in America, in Europe, and in Palestine, there are millions of those Jews who do not work. Who do not work. They just live on government subsidies in Palestine, in the US, on state and federal subsidies in Europe. All their job is to sit and study the Talmud. Just to study. Basically, they do not work. And in Palestine, they do not go to military service. If you remember, some of you, we had in one of our classes talk about a big scandal that took place 2 years ago when the FBI was following a ring of rabbis. You know, this is a ring of rabbis in New Jersey and the surrounding, where basically those rabbis come to those people who study the Talmud, and each one of them have 8 children and 10 children, and all of them are living on, of course, state and government money in this regard. And they start making more and more cases to get millions of dollars. They said tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds, gain from that. So when the FBI caught that ring, they observed it for about a year. Many apologists within the Jewish community in the US say, well, you know, this culture, they came from Russia with this mentality. Now, why this is an issue right now? Because this may bring down the government. The religious parties within Palestine, the Jewish religious parties, they have enjoyed 2 things all along, free of charge. They enjoyed lots of money being given to them to study the Talmud, do nothing else. Just bring children and study the Talmud. Bring children and study the Talmud. And secondly, they do not go to military service. The Zionists, they do not have a big army. They have a big reserve army. So basically the army may be around 100, 150,000, but they have about 500,000 or so reservists that they go and train each year, certain, weeks, like the National Guard in the States in here. Now, with this comes a conflict also between the religious right, the politicians, not the religious Orthodox Jews. We are talking now about Smotrich and Ibn Gfir. So Ibn Gfir was in charge of the police. Under him, prisoners were killed since October 7. Those are prisoners who have been in Palestinian prisons for tens of years. Some of them were there for 30 and 40 years. So suddenly they will send 40 guards on one person, keep beating him until he's dead. And this is not news from the Arab world, this is news from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper. And some of those accidents, so-called accidents, they will come and say, oh, natural death. So 40 people beating one person and killing him, and then they come and say natural death. Now this guy cut the food and cut the visitation and this and that because he became in charge of what? Of the police. That's what he asked for. And what also would be for him is to be in charge of Al-Aqsa. That's what he asked for. So he came last month and saying, during Ramadan, we will not allow the Palestinians who are in 1948 to come for Al-Aqsa. Now, for those who attend the classes, the Palestinians of 1948 mean those who carry Israeli citizenship. So those are citizens of the state. And there are about 2.2 million, 2.3, 2.4 million of them that when the Israelis do the accounting and say that we have 7.5 million Jews, right? Or I should say 7.5 million people living in the Israelis, they count about 2.2, 2.3 million Palestinians, Christians and mostly Muslims. So Ibn Gfir comes and says, I will not allow them to go to Al-Aqsa. And said, for people from the West Bank, 0 people will be allowed to go to Al-Aqsa. And then a messy situation arises. Because within the West Bank and Gaza, the Israeli army is in charge. In Jerusalem and in 1948, the police is in charge. In fact, the police overrules the army in this regard. So when the differences became clear that the police is saying no to Palestinians coming in Ramadan, the army is saying we have to have them come in Ramadan, otherwise we will have a messy situation and we will have a revolt in the West Bank in 1948 and we cannot handle it when the war is ongoing in Gaza. Anyway, he insisted on his position. Last week, the same cabinet met together and said that Ibn Ghafir from now on will not be responsible for Al-Aqsa. And of course, you can imagine his reaction. He went on Twitter saying to Netanyahu, I want you to go public and say this is not the case. Of course, Netanyahu did not go public because that was the case. That's what was agreeing in this regard. There was demonstration in the streets, not about the hostages and about, we need election. There was demonstration by the religious Haredi Jews who do not want to serve in the army, who do not want to serve in the army in the past. So we have seen in the last 4 or 5 days those contradictions, among others, coming from within the Israeli society. Now, on the Palestinian level, unfortunately, we have seen the Palestinian Authority sending its own armed men to Jenin and to fight with the young men and who are fighting the Israeli army in the West Bank. And this just shows that the Palestinian Authority is not just a tool in the hands of the Zionists. They are acting as the Zionists and on behalf of the Zionists. And for them to go to Mukhayyam Jenin and start shooting at the young men inside the camp because the Israelis want to arrest one, just show you the challenges that the people of Palestine are facing. That it's not just the Zionists, even the so-called Palestinian Authority is participating in the war with those Zionists. Of course, you're going to hear some of the people, in the authority talking about the genocide in Gaza and this and that. They are doing, the same to a less level in West Bank. They have been suppressing the people from October 7. We've seen Blinken visiting Abbas and saying, good job, that you are in control of the West Bank. We want to keep the West Bank quiet and this and that. And it's not a secret that they have been doing this enmity. Now come to the major question of the ceasefire. We have discussed before that the Arab countries have approached the US in the middle of December and saying basically Israel have until the beginning of March to do whatever they want in Gaza, as long as there will be a ceasefire in Ramadan. Because if there's no ceasefire in Ramadan, they fear that there will be instabilities in the countries that surround Palestine. So they made it clear. And we have seen Biden and the US administration talking about the need for a ceasefire, that we need to have a ceasefire, temporary 6 week ceasefire, temporary 6 week. In fact, it went to the extent last week that Biden said by Monday, meaning by tomorrow, we have to have a ceasefire. But of course, the massacre of Gaza, of the wheat, took place. And let me just say a few words to try to understand what had happened. So there's so much pressure on the Zionists to let food into northern Gaza, because there is some food was coming to the south. It's not enough, but there is some food that was coming. But North Gaza, for a while, no food. And there were reports of death from hunger. So because of the pressure on those Zionists, the Zionists decide, okay, we will let food come to the north of Gaza from a separate entrance. Because the bulk of the trucks were coming from Egypt side, Rafah. From Egypt side through Rafah to Khan Yunis and its surrounding. So the Zionists came with this thing that, yeah, okay, we'll have food. And they got food to come from where? from the north. There's a place in the north of Gaza that these trucks could come. About 20 trucks plus came. The problem is they brought 20 trucks to people who are so hungry, and there was no mechanism for distribution. Because the distribution until now, for the hundreds of trucks or 1,000 plus so far that came from the beginning, although in one day used to come to Gaza 500 trucks, these trucks were the one that came after October 7, were distributed in Gaza by whom? By the UNRWA and by the UN food program. Now the Israelis came and says the UNRWA has members of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others in it. Now UNRWA have 33,000 Palestinian employees. 33,000. So Israel came and said, oh, 4 of them were part of the October 7. The US took a decision to freeze the money to UNRWA. The European took a decision to freeze the money. Spain increased the money. Basically, the UNRWA is an organization that was established in 1949 when the kuffar get together and force the Jews to have a state in Palestine. As a result, they form an organization called Al-Wakala, UNRWA, UN organization that cares for employment and the affairs of the refugees. And from that point on until today, it's a major force that helps the refugees. Israel had made it clear in the past and recently they want the UNRWA to be finished. Khalas, there's no need for it. Why? Because as long as the UNRWA is there, it just says that there's a problem that's called the Palestinian problem. If the UNRWA is nowhere to be seen, then yeah, problem is solved. UNRWA care for 7.2 million Palestinians in Gaza, West Bank, Jordan, and among other countries. So when the Israelis got the food from the north and no mechanism for distribution, what you would imagine, thousands of people hurry toward the trucks. When the Israeli army saw those thousands, they were not armed, but they thought, wow, this is a danger for the Israeli army. They start shooting. And they killed the bulk. So initially they said, oh, we were just hitting at the legs with it, but then the tanks start sending shells. And the Israeli narration changed few times because basically it was a massacre done by the Israelis themselves in this regard. They brought the 20 plus trucks to say, here, we are bringing food to Gaza, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew and things really went totally against them. All over the world, cries start that we need to have a ceasefire, that they have, because they cannot say those are Hamas. Clearly, there were cameras all over the place. Those people were unarmed. So in the past few days, with this combination, came the issue of that we need to have the ceasefire from the results that we discussed before. And all of these things, from the Gallant issue with the reserve, to Gantz issue coming to Washington, D.C., to Ibn Ghafir issue with the differences, to the demonstration by the Haredi, to Hamas realizing that, those Zionists, they have to have something by Ramadan, they start really extending their legs and start saying, we need this and we need this and we need that and we have to have this and we have to have this to the ceasefire. And basically each side start pulling. So at one point, Hamas was saying, oh, things looks, promising. We can have a ceasefire in 48 hours. The Israelis pulled out. Before that, the Israelis came and Hamas saying, we are not getting what we want. Hamas pulled out. So it has been, a tug of, war between the two of who is the reason for this, who is the reason for that. Now, you have seen today the Vice President of the US, Harris, in Alabama, saying clearly, we have to have an immediate ceasefire. And this is new. And this is big. I know some of you will say, what's the big deal? They are slaughtering the Muslims with their US weapons. Yes, yes, they are. They are, no doubt about it. But what we need to realize is that the price is getting higher and higher, and for them, they would be big embarrassment for this administration, for its influence in the Middle East, for its influence among the so-called their friends, if they cannot get a ceasefire done by beginning of Ramadan. So you heard Biden say, yes, we're going to get a ceasefire before Ramadan, but it will not be Monday. Because he already said it will be Monday in this regard. Now, adding insult to injury to the US position is they start saying, oh, okay, there's this famine, people are dying from hunger, we have to do something. So what did they do? Oh, we're going to airdrop food to Gaza. And as a UN representative put it, precisely, he said the airdrops of food is a photo opportunity, no more, no less. It's a photo opportunity, just saying, you see things coming from the sky, raining food and raining this and that. All of it is just a play and a game, just to say that we are doing something. And it was so ridiculous that the US said the first day they brought 3 C-130 planes, and the 3 planes gave 38,000 meals. 38,000 meals to, we have how many? 2.3 million people. And according to the Israeli press, they have skeletus, candy in some of these these foods. Again, the US is embarrassed. But the US at the same time cannot come clearly at this point and say to Netanyahu, if you are not going to cooperate, no more weapons. They can't. I mean, you have seen they have issues in Michigan with Muslims voting for no one. Imagine if he will try to go on a collision course with the Israelis, he will have a big problem with the Jews voters in the US. So it's not a position that can be dealt, but the US know that they have to do something. And within this context, we saw that this invitation for Gantz to come to the US to deal with this issue. In one way, they are promoting Gantz. Because if there's some election coming, and we saw today Lieberman, who heads a party in Israel, he said, until now, I did not call for election because we are in the middle of the war. But today, I call for election. And he said, I call for election because there's too many contradictions within the war cabinet and we cannot move on. All of these things are bringing pressure. And Netanyahu is no longer, immune in like the old days, because now the left is hitting him and the right is hitting him. He have a case of corruption in the courts and he's being hit out of the court. He have an issue with the families of the hostages. He have an issue with the Haredi being called for service. In fact, he went on national TV and said, what you guys are doing is something that Hamas could not do, which is to bring down this government. And this is what you are doing. He said that we need to negotiate this, because if this comes to a vote, if this comes to a collision, this will bring a problem for this government, which Hamas failed to do, and this will bring election, and election means the end of the war. So that's basically good news within the contradiction that are taking place in the within those Zionist circles in this regard. And the US understand, and they are trying to play on that aspect. But so far, it was failure. They have failed miserably in this regard. I mean, imagine the president of the main power in the world saying, by Monday, this was last week, by Monday we'll have a ceasefire, and Monday comes and goes. That's a big embarrassment. And whoever is advising him, the public relation, I mean, imagine somebody's talking about the tragedy and the genocide that's going on in Gaza and this and that, and he's eating ice cream. You know, you know, this Gaza thing cannot continue. The children are suffering. I mean, who's advising this stupid president? They have to be really super stupid, because what sort of image you are giving? You are talking about a very serious issue. You know, I mean, licking ice cream and talking about this thing. You just wonder what they were thinking in this regard. So there is an embarrassment. Now, when it comes, unfortunately, to the rest of the Arab governments, there's not much. In fact, there's no doubt, there should not be any doubt in our minds, that Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi and Mohammed bin Zayed in the Emirates and Sisi in Egypt are conspiring against Hamas. No doubt about it. Let's not fool ourselves. هم العدو فاحذرهم. They are the enemy of this ummah. They care very much less about anything that would happen or any harm. They were saying to the Americans, look, you have two and a half months in December. Just go and do whatever it takes. And this is not my words. The Israeli politicians are saying that the Arab governments, the leaders are saying, finish Hamas. Those are Israeli politicians. They are saying that the Arab governments are saying to us in secret, just go and finish Hamas. And we have mentioned before that when Yemen have come and says no more Zionist ships going through the Red Sea, through Bab al-Mandab, gonna shoot. And the harbors within Palestine that are controlled by the Zionists were hit very hard, that there were not much traffic ongoing. And what had happened? The Israelis came and said, we thank the Emirates and the Saudis and Jordanians, because now we are going around the Yemeni embargo. Because now the ships are coming from China and Japan and somewhere else to the Abu Dhabi, where from Abu Dhabi they are loaded on trucks that goes through Saudi and Jordan, not to support the people of Gaza, but to support the Zionists. And this is a minister in the Israeli government saying, we thank them for this alternate route that now, you know, goes around this Houthi thing. So from that aspect, the reality did not change. Those people are plotting against the reality of what the people, aspiration of the people of Palestine. Now, shifting gears to Moscow. We have seen this week in Moscow groups, Palestinian Authority, PA, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Communist Party, and the rest of the jazz in the Palestinian landscape, meeting in Moscow to coordinate and to talk about future unity and this and this and this and that. And this is again another one of those tricks. Because basically, suddenly in the Israeli press, this is the Israeli press, not the Arab press, the Israeli press, saying within a day or two, the Shatiya government will submit its resignation. So the Israelis knew before the Arabs. This was in the Israeli press, that within a day or two, you know, the Shatiya government will submit a resignation. And then a high level, I'm not sure how high, maybe so high that they will fall down. A high level Palestinian authority says, no, it will take a few weeks. But within a day or two, Shatiya submit his resignation. What does that tell you? The decision to dismiss the government came from Washington, D.C. That's, the Palestinians have no say in it. Abbas wanted to keep his chair. So basically, they said, well, let's sacrifice the government. And now they are talking about appointing Muhammad Mustafa, who leads the Palestinian Fund, as a technocrat government. And I like the statement by one of those, people who said, yeah, it will be a technocrat government run by a bureaucrat people. But so on the face, there will be technocrats, people who have expertise in this field and this field and this field. But the decision will be made by the same rotten BOA people, the same bureaucrat who are now, taking advantage of the money and the wealth and whatever comes to support Palestine and being distributed among few, while the bulk is suffering. Whether there will be a government or not, and how long and who will be, that's not really, it's beside the issue. All of this is because Biden came and said, we need to talk about what's after Gaza. And suddenly the British Foreign Secretary said, we are looking into recognizing a Palestinian state. And then the US says, we are looking into recognizing a Palestinian state. And then Macron of France said that Palestinian state for us is not a taboo. And the Zionists got really very alarmed. Because now the three criminal governments that have worked together to arm the Zionists are talking about, it's time that we come and find something for the Palestinians, which is a state. Now remember, the French are the one who gave the nuclear reactor to the Israelis. And the British, who initially gave them the initial arms, set them up in Palestine. And eventually the US, until today, give them the support. So those are the three major sources of criminality for the Palestinian people all those years. And it got to the point where Bolton, who used to be Trump National Security Advisor, says they are stabbing Israel in the back. Just by talking about considering a Palestinian state, he said this is a stab during the war, a stab to the Israelis in the back. So Netanyahu was refusing to talk about anything after Gaza. And suddenly the pressure was so much, since those guys started talking about Palestinian state, that he came and said, I have a plan for after Gaza. What's your plan after Gaza? It's what we have before Gaza. Even Haaretz says that, and his plan is no plan. Basically he said, we will be in charge of the West Bank, we'll be in charge of Gaza, of security from all, in my term, in the boundaries of Palestine, from the river to the sea, we will be in charge of it. And that created again an issue within the society itself. Netanyahu came and claimed victory when he called upon the Knesset to vote against this Palestinian state, where 99 of 120 supported the resolution. But very clearly, those who came to the vote, many of them were against what Netanyahu is all about. And that was the issue. He was able to evade himself as the issue and make the issue, I got the support. 99 supported me. It was not supporting him. It was that they did not have a choice but to say this, for a Palestinian state, they will vote no. At least at this point, because some of them know down the road that they cannot continue the way that things are. Now, inshallah, in a few minutes, where things will be heading, I still think most likely by beginning of Ramadan we will have something of a ceasefire that will be for, not as Hamas wanted, for a long time. It will be for a limited time. But the US logic, if we have it for a limited time, which they convey to the Qataris, to convey to the Hamasis, that if we have for a limited time, we will make it difficult to go back to the war. Now the Israelis, the Zionists, basically saying that we have to go through Rafah, because Rafah is the last major base where the Israeli army did not invade. And although they still having big issues in the north, where they said things are settled, they're still having casualties. And they are having casualties in Khan Yunis and in other places, and the numbers are not small. Talking about this, in fact, the Washington Post yesterday was saying 10% of those who are killed in Gaza are American citizens. 10%. And I mentioned in many places in Khutab, the worst settlers in the West Bank, the worst among them, who really are so, show enmity to the people of Palestine and do all sorts of mischief, and they want to burn, and you remember, let's burn Huwara and this and this and that, are American settlers, are American citizens. To show that really all this empty talks that are coming from many circles about Palestinians and their rights, at the same time they are teaching in their schools, raising a generation of hatred. And this is not new, by the way. This is not new. I remember when I was a student, a teacher came, I was wearing a red hatta, and she came and said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Palestine." And I could see that it's as if she was bitten. Then she composed herself, "Oh, how is the situation there?" So I start talking. And I could see in her face she did not buy a word of what I said. This was a spring semester. I saw her after the summer. I was not taking a course with her, but she pointed to me to go and, toward her. So I went, I said, hi, how are you? She said, "I went and visited Israel this summer, and I'm sorry to tell you all what you said was correct." She said, "This is not what we were taught in the school, in the synagogue. We were told that the people of Palestine are the ones who are bloodthirsty. They are the ones who want this. They are the ones who want this." She said, "This is how we were raised." And she said, in a sense, we were taken for a ride. Well, this thing is still the same mentality. And if you see the hearing that have been in the past few days in Congress, and some of the statesmen that are taking place at the universities in California, where basically this head of the Jewish organization in University of California in Los Angeles says that we are all Zionists. Now this is a different game altogether. Because Zionism is as bad as Nazism and fascism. Those are the same people that Einstein wrote in his letter to the New York Times when Menachem Begin came to the US to collect money to get legitimacy. They're saying about those Zionists, and the letter is there for the record, those who want to see. They were saying that those are like the Nazis and the fascists. And who inherited that legacy? It's Netanyahu and company. And of course, we have now worse than the Nazis and the fascists. We have Ibn Gfir and Smotrich. Smotrich clearly in the 21st century, and we close with this, is telling the Palestinians, Yarhamukumullah, is telling the Palestinians, either you leave this land for us, meaning go to Jordan and go to Egypt and leave it for us, or you live subjugated to our rule, and your third choice, we will kill you. This is in the 21st century, and he is a minister. I would imagine if there's a minister in one of those Arab, high in Arab countries would say something like this, and let's see what the westward will be reacted to this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the khair and the good for this ummah and elevate the suffering from the people of Palestine and help the Muslims in this country to continue doing the work to make the price of what the Zionists are doing a very, very hefty price on them and their reputation. Allahumma ameen. We have a question for, or time for one comment and another time for one question, inshallah. Any? Yes? Certainly.
I know in a number of the classes you talked about I don't know what to call it, a war, but I'll just use the word war, being over before Ramadan because it may create a messy situation in some countries. And I'm not clear on this messy situation. You use that phrase quite a bit, the messy situation. What specifically would be what's the real concern of the U.S. or CC or any of these countries, these leaders of this? What specifically, what are you talking about? What would be the problem?
Okay. Now what we have is 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza with genocide day and night. So that case, put it on the side. We have about 2.1, 2.2 million Palestinians who are in the 1948 land, who are Israeli citizens. And we have about 2.5 million Palestinians who are in the West Bank. Okay? If you do a little reading on the Intifada, the second Intifada, the life under the Zionists came to a standstill because the whole West Bank revolted. Life came to a standstill. Operations all over the place. Villages were out of control. Cities starting, not just demonstrating and whatever, shooting and with the army, and many within the Israeli army were killed at that time. So you imagine with me if that, in Ramadan, if this thing would continue and the West Bank and the 1948, they would be told no access to Al-Aqsa. People of Gaza have nothing to break their fast on, and a spontaneous revolt happened. Who can stop it? It already happened. During the Second Intifada, just go to the encyclopedia and read, put Second Intifada and see the price that the Israeli economy, the Israeli population, the Israeli normal life, the Israeli schools, the Israelis, all of this came to a standstill. So we are not talking about 10 people or 100 or 100,000. We are talking about within the borders of Palestine. Within the borders of Palestine, there are 7 million Palestinians, mostly Muslims and some Christians. 7 million. There are about 8 or 9 million Jews. So if this thing erupts, who can stop it? And people at that point, people start sacrificing their life. It's just you leave your home not knowing if you're going to come back or not. The point is that I want to kill a soldier. I want to do this. I want to do this. This is within Palestine. Now, the situation in Jordan, in Egypt, in some other Arab countries, if this thing continues in Ramadan and they see some of these things in this regard, you can have something similar to what had happened in the so-called Arab Spring, where people go to the street. And then the army will start killing. But they will kill their own people. So the concern is there because this thing could blow up. And that's why the army was very adamant against Ibn Ghafir, saying basically, look, if we're going to follow your direction and prevent the 1948 from coming to Al-Aqsa and the people from the West Bank, you are calling for an explosion in those two parts, and we cannot control it. I described a few minutes ago when Netanyahu fired Gallant, right? He fired him. So what had happened? The airport shut down. The healthcare system shut down. Transportation shut down. The country came to a standstill. And he, humiliated, had to reverse his decision. So imagine if the Palestinians took those steps. And on both sides of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they appeal to the people to start marching toward Al-Aqsa on the first day of Ramadan. And that will be a nightmare. Yes, it'll be a much messier situation in what comes, and who knows, with those settlers start shooting and this and that. I mean, it'll be a messy situation, but that's what they're talking about. Is that clear? Any last question or comment before we conclude? يا أخي تفضل. سلام الله. That's a very good question. Yeah, sure. He's saying, he already heard the description of the Palestinian Authority and what they are doing. He said, is there a way to get rid of the Palestinian Authority? I wish I could tell you that, there is this way or that way. But the reality is, the kuffar have put a system in the West Bank such that you have tens of thousands of armed men who they were sure to choose to be loyal to the PA, meaning to the Israelis, and against their own people. And I'll give you an example. Haaretz had an interview with a Palestinian, I'm not going to call them soldiers, he's an armed guy working for the Palestinian Authority. So he was talking to the Haaretz, and he said, look, I have got my salary. My salary goes to the bank. The bank take all the loans, and they give me the rest. He said, after taking all my loans, they gave me 128 shekels. What's 128 shekels? $30. So basically, he said, I have $30 in the beginning of the month, and I will live for the whole month, supposedly, on this salary. So it's not just that they gave them arms. The criminal, Salam Fayyad, who was a prime minister, came to the banks in Palestine and told the banks, where do the reserves go? Where does the deposits go? There are deposits from Palestine. They said, we send it to Cairo and to Amman. He said, from now on, the deposits in Palestine stay in Palestine, and you lend it to the people. So basically now, the bulk of the people, and I mean it, the bulk of the people have taken loans. And the way the system works there, your salary comes, if you work for the Palestinian Authority, or if you work for a private bank or what have you, your salary goes to the bank, they take all the loans, so you have a loans for the cell phone, you have a loans for the furniture, you have the loans for the, if you have a car, and so on and so forth. So they told the people basically, your life and your living is tied to us being here. And we are the source of your income. 180,000 people take monthly salary from Abbas, in and out of the West Bank and Gaza. So basically, the only way that we will be taken about is, a whole massacre that will take place, but now at the hand of the Palestinian Authority and the settlers at the same time. And what's the output? There is no prospective leadership. Yes, there are some people who are more clean than this corrupted, gang in Ramallah. There's no doubt about it. But they do not have much. And basically, just like Abbas does not have a gang of himself. So when the election came after Arafat's death, the Israelis and the Americans met with Fatah and said that either Abbas will become your candidate or you are not going to get a penny. And it's known, there's no much economy in Palestine. It's all based on foreign European and American and Arab government supports. So yeah, it's a big jail. It's a big jail, and the prospect for that, they are talking about now having this, a new government to be there. But for the Palestinian people to get rid of this, it will be a messy situation, and we are not talking about tens of thousands of deaths, because they are willing to go all the way to wipe out a big chunk of the people to stay in power, because that's their task. That's what they were brought to do, and that's what they are being paid by the US and the Europe to do, so-called التنسيق الأمني. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم إن شاء الله. Hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy soon on the people of Gaza and Palestine and the rest of the Ummah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring this Ramadan to shower His blessings on this Ummah and show us days that are better than the days, and make intiqam from those cursed Zionists that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have tested this Ummah with. Allahumma ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.